Madagascar, and so forth, to try and expose or identify the corruption risks in the education and healthcare sector through this inclusive service delivery in Africa project. So the whole idea of this particular project is firstly to identify the corruption risks that are existing and try to respond to these particular risks either at a policy level, and also create joint actions either from the CSOs, and also enhance the capacity of the ministries to respond to some of the corruption risks. So what we have done so far as a Transparency International Zimbabwe in the last 2 years is that we have conducted 2 key research outputs. One of the researches that we're speaking about today in the education sector is that we identified what we call the priority areas where corruption is prone to occur in the education sector. And some of the priority areas that we identified include corruption in the procurement. Even at a district level, we have seen that there are gaps in following proper procurement procedures. And that actually presents as one of the most risks that we have actually identified. Another risk that we've identified is the aspect of BIM, how the selection of students in the basic education assistance module has occurred. In some instances, we have seen that there is either nepotism, and in some instances, people actually pay the headmasters at a lower level for them to have access to the government program, the BIM. Then the third issue, we have seen that there is a mismanagement of resources, particularly at a district level. We have seen that resources such as cars and other resources that the Ministry of Education has procured is either being abused by the school authorities, and that actually affects the quality of education and the effective service delivery. And also we have seen that there is a rise. One of the most topical issues is the supplementary tutoring, what some they call it extra lessons. That has been is now the norm. We have seen that teachers deliberately push or create the environment for extra lessons to occur, even despite the ministry putting out pronouncements against it or measures around it. This has been one of the avenues that has been used to fleece the parents of their hard-earned money. And then also we have seen that there is another corruption risk on staff recruitment. Cases of corruption, bribery, petty bribery, and in some extreme cases, we've seen cases of sextortion occurring when one wants to have either to be transferred maybe from the rural areas into the urban areas. Those that are in authority actually demand even sex as a form of payment. So these are some of the risks that we have identified as a TIZ. And then now to come into the last part of your question in terms of how then does that fit in terms of the budgeting. We have seen that as much as there's a gap between what is said in the financial budgets and what the ministry actually gets, or at the time at which they do get these. And in some instances, there are delayed disbursements that affect the quality of services. We have seen that the money at times is not enough, and schools end up using creative, in quotes, ways to try and sustain or run the schools. So these are some of the issues that we have identified. And the impact in all this is that people or groups that are at risk of discrimination, women, girls, and those that are people with disabilities have challenges in accessing quality kind of service. And it is in this context that we are framing this particular project to try and work with the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education as one of the key stakeholders to address some of these challenges.
So you have presented some of these challenges to the ministry, yes?
Yes, yes.
And they have said they will work on them?
What we have done is we have shared this particular report, and secondly, we have actually had some meetings, some training workshops to try and identify some of these gaps. And I think we are in the process, because some of these things, they do okay even at the lower levels, and I think this is a work in progress with the ministry.
Now, Tongana, confirmation that the report has come to your desk, and I'm sure you have read and seen the findings from the ISDA project. What is your take from that? What are you doing, rather, as the ministry, in order to address some of these challenges that have been posed?
Thank you very much for that question. We are pleased that Transparency International has managed to highlight these issues, which are very key within the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. They talk about corruption, which as the ministry, we have a zero tolerance to corruption. We have seen corruption in various facets. He's talked of them, because I think everything else that he's been talking about has to do with corruption. We are not lenient on anyone that is found to be corrupt. As a ministry, we have now adopted a policy where even an allegation of corruption would get you suspended. Just an allegation. You then have to clear your name, because those allegations, we don't believe that someone can just wake up from the comfort of their home and then say, Madam Nyaude is conducting extra lessons which are paid for. No. Madam Nyaude has to show cause that she's clear, she didn't charge for any extra lessons. He's talked of various assets of corruption. Let's start with the extra lessons, for instance. They're not illegal by their nature, as per our policy. You can have extra tutorials as a teacher because you want to explain a certain concept within a learning area which your pupils may not have understood, and it goes. Mm-hmm. Our problem comes when a teacher starts to charge for extra lessons. And once they charge for extra lessons, they identify children with parents whom they know can pay for those extra lessons. Not only do they end there, they then start to discriminate against those children who have got parents who cannot afford for extra lessons. So what then happens is that these children with parents who pay for extra lessons then receive the curriculum and the effective teaching and learning, whilst the others, even though they've paid school fees, they are then disadvantaged. This is where the corrupt element of extra lessons comes into play. There are some who are even very daring that they conduct these extra lessons within our schools, within the classroom premises. That then becomes abuse of office, because the office of a teacher is the classroom. Mm-hmm. Now, if you are then identifying certain pupils for them to pay, and then you're also then using the same facility which is being provided by government to use that office as your haven to conduct those extra lessons, we have a problem with that sort of corruption. And we are not very lenient with anybody who's been found to conduct paid for extra lessons. We know there are other teachers who are slightly dodgy. They conduct these extra lessons, but outside the school premises. They conduct these extra lessons at some other dingy facilities, but we always warn parents that they run the risk of facing other misdemeanors within those sort of settings.
Now, I'm sorry, I just have to jump in. We are facing a bit of a technical error. We'll be right back with the chase just after this.
Learning has gone up and away on the ZTN Prime Kids Block as we blast off into the world of science, language, mathematics, and many more.
There's a living dinosaur in the woods!
Get the crew together, let's have an after-school homework party.
Your friends would think so too. Definitely. It would be nice if everyone could enjoy them. Aliens.
Unicorns. I wonder what the unicorns would wear.
Remember, learning is fun when you're tuned into ZTN Prime.
Boy Robo to the rescue!
The ZTN Prime Kids Block. Catch it Monday to Friday from 3 to 5 p.m. on DSTV channel 294. Get the picture?
The Phoenix Podcast has always brought you the best of the best.
I missed on that blessing, but I also regained it in some way.
In seasons 1 and 2, we introduced you to the industry's brightest stars, the ones at the top of their game, the creme de la creme. But season 3 promises to be even more exciting. We're bringing you even more fascinating guests, including the renowned farmer, Patrick Matadi. And to top it all off, our very own host, Ken Sharp, will be stepping out of the interviewer's chair and into the hot seat as he gets interviewed by a surprise guest host.
From the boss, we've been beaten, but we're not beaten yet. We can still rise.
Konapo Konapo, Ipapo Ipapo, Bazetian Prime, DSTV channel 294, the place to be.
Welcome back. You are still watching The Chase, Technical Error Fixed. Now, before the break, we were talking about some of the findings from the ISDA project that was done by Transparency International Zimbabwe. And Tongani, you're just explaining to us some of these challenges that you have seen or that you are going to address. But my question now is, prior to Transparency International coming with these findings from their projects, were you not aware of some of the things that are happening in the industry?
We are very much aware of these issues that have been happening in delving our sector, the education sector. It's a good thing that Transparency International has come on board as a development partner to also assist us in also giving their own opinions, because they are not within the ministry itself. So they come with also their observations, which you also then take on board in order for us to then implement them as policy if we agree that this is the way that we should go.
Mm-hmm. Now, Sfiso, you were listening to what these two gentlemen have said. I would want you to weigh in now from your standpoint as a teachers association.
Thank you very much. Without taking anything away from TIZ research, one would like to respond from a systems thinking. I missed the point as to what are they saying as the root cause of what they are finding as corruption. What is the root cause of what they're finding? And from the ministry's point of view, what are they trying to solve? The issue here is about education financing in Zimbabwe. And I start from a position where I say the financing of education system in Zimbabwe is a political choice. And in Zimbabwe, we have chosen the side of justice, which means that education in Zimbabwe is supported by the law, and financing education in Zimbabwe is supported by law. Section 75 of our constitution does that. That's the fundamental law. And secondly, the issue of our education is supported by social development. And in our Vision 2030, we have a number of goals that we want to achieve. And included in them is that society must be a middle income earner by 2030. That alone cannot be achieved unless we fund education adequately. And therefore, funding education becomes a state responsibility. And when I come to look at it, the fundamental problem here is the funding of education, which brings in all these kind of things that we are dealing. Let's not deal with symptoms. Let's answer the problem. And the problem starts funding. How then do we do it? We are saying in the budgeting process, one of the first fundamentals that we can do is to legislate. At the beginning of the show, you highlighted that there is need for us maybe to get to the benchmark of the Dakar framework of saying 20%. We are saying ourselves in education as practitioners in teaching, the 20% is not enough. We should be going beyond 20% because here we are foolproofing our future so that we invest more for us to get a little bit better in the future so that we can have a system where you're saying economic development in the future is guaranteed. The lives of people is guaranteed. Crime is reduced. Expenditure in social sectors will be reduced in the future because we've invested in education. So what must we do? Let us legislate. Instead of saying 20%, we should be saying in Zimbabwe, our benchmark standard is 25%. If we make a law which legislates for the provision of funding in budgetary terms for education, we will be starting on the right phase. There are many examples of people who have done that. Countries like Ghana in Africa, for example, they've introduced 2.5% VAT for supporting education, and they support infrastructure in education. In a way, we should ring-fence the non-salary related investment in education, which is the infrastructure, ICTs, school classrooms, and many other things that come in there, like we were already talking about buses. This should not be funded by the public. We are digging deeper into the poverty of the public and saying fund education. Something is wrong there. We should be looking at our bases very well as a country. So we start from that position. And obviously, when the ministry comes on heavy with teachers, our role would be obviously to look at, has there been a fair look at the case? Is there a process that has been done? So we believe, therefore, this must be done.
Now, Ngobani and Tongan, I'm sure you heard what he's just said. He has said, from your end as the ministry, let's talk about the funding gap, the money that is being put from the national budget. What have you done about it in that regard? Because that's where the symptoms of everything that the research from TIZ has come from. And from your end now is TIZ. He's posing the question of, when you did your research, did you also consider what has been the root causes? I'll ask TIZ to step in and answer first.
Okay, so when we look at corruption broadly, there are so many factors at play. In this context, yes, we can speak on resource allocation as one of the key issues. There are no resources. Teachers do not have resources. And that actually, like I said in my first submission, was that they become so creative around that particular aspect. So the resource allocation, it's one of the key issues. Secondly, we need to understand that teachers, the education sector, works also within the broader context of the political, economic, and social context in Zimbabwe, where already in other studies we have indicated that there is a culture of corruption. Survival amongst the citizens is key. And we have seen that citizens, basically, they try to, as much as they can, to bypass the systems, create avenues for their own private gain. Equally, the education sectors or the practitioners also in that particular context use those particular avenues. The third issue is also, we need to also understand that maybe our policy implementation or system approach might be having some leakages. The systems, if there are opportunities for systems not being effective, people are bound to be more corrupt and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then another issue is, which I remember in one of the meetings that we're having with some of the key stakeholders, they indicated that the issue of remuneration drives them to actually engage in corruption, devising extra lessons and other things. So there are so many factors, and I think it's actually a broad. In a nutshell, there are so many moving pieces for us to come up with an understanding how corruption occurs in the education sector.
Mm-hmm. Now, Tangwana, like I did indicate earlier, the 20% recommended allocation from the national budget, as said by the Dakar Declaration. Why have we not achieved that? How far are we from achieving that? What is stopping the Ministry of Education in their tracks from pushing for that 20% or even more, as Fiso was saying?
Thank you for that question. We need to understand that Zimbabwe has got quite a number of priorities, but obviously one of the most important priorities there is education. And I can confidently tell you that the budget allocation on education is over 20%. This is when we take into consideration the budget that is given to higher and tertiary education. It then becomes around 21-22%. So this is where we are. And the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education year in, year out, is the one that gets the lion's share of the national cake. So we, as government, we fund the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education more than any other ministry in government. But obviously, there will be other challenges that you find here and there. But government is doing its best to ensure that education is funded through and through.
Now, so yes.
Yeah, one of the missing pieces that I see in the whole debate and infrastructure, which I would like to introduce, from TIZ, I think it is important that in your consultations, do not overlook teacher unions, because we are the representatives and we do provide some insights into some of the things that we have. So I would be loved in the validation of your research maybe to find a space to talk around that issue.
Do you consult teacher organizations?
Yes, I think what we need to understand is the framework of the research. The research specifically, it's a corruption risk assessment that tried by all means to also see how corruption affects women, girls, and groups at risk of discrimination. So the bulk of the stakeholders were those groups that are at risk of discrimination.
Okay, so you can proceed.
Thank you very much. I think, well, I've said my point in case, because it does touch on the risk that teachers do have. And there are teachers, like when he was talking about sex for jobs and sex for transfers, is really an issue that affects education. And from a professional point of view, as a teacher, it's an indictment if that is happening, and that must be addressed. And we think we must come in to assist. And then coming in there, I was saying, from a planning purpose, purposefully, government should, in the plan for Vision 2030, now as we enter into NTS 2, factor in education as part of its consideration, and also bring in the issue of the debt infrastructure that we are trying to create, that we bring in education. Why? It must be ring-fenced in that area as we seek to deal with our debt, which is obviously over 17 billion of our debt in the country, and obviously more than 5 billion locally. We should also factor in education so that the funders and those people that are involved can also have a say in contributing to our education. Otherwise, we find education being subjected to austerities that have to answer to the debt management system that we have. And once we don't ring-fence it away from the austerities of debt infrastructure, then we have a problem. So we must integrate it in that planning of the processes. This is where we come in to say education doesn't seem to be planned. I have a challenge when education becomes a casualty, like what Ndoro was saying, that there are so many competing interests. When it becomes a casualty of political changes and economic changes, then we have a problem of the future outcomes that we're intending. Remember, we set up curriculum in order to create a national roadmap, and that roadmap must have the how part, and the how part is now killed by these coming in injectors.
Now, from what he has said, he has given us the reassurance that the allocation from the national budget is actually about 21%, so to speak, if it is divided amongst the primary sector as well as the tertiary sector. From your perspective as the unions, do you see this budgeting working? Has it been working for education systems so far?
Like I said, when you talk of 20%, it's a benchmark. And the 2024-25 budget, from our calculation, there was a good attempt to provide education with above that. It's 19.6 for our primary and secondary, and a little bit added to higher and tertiary, then we can go to 21. But when you look at the numbers and the figures, 90% of that money now is salary based, or 88% is salary based, leaving very little for infrastructure. And when you leave very little for infrastructure, you are actually not investing in education, but we are investing more, yes, on human resources, fine. But even in the human resources, we still lack, because that is only going for salaries. But things like teacher development and continuous development suffer.
Now, Tangana, if you could just explain to us from your end as the ministry, how does the budgeting work? When the money comes in, how are you allocating it and how are you distributing it across the education sector in order to address some of the challenges that are now being, are now being brought up by TIZ's projects, for example?
For instance, you'll find that, let me start with the one that was raised by TIZ, the issue of the Basic Education Assistance Module. That budget lies within the Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, which then is then transferred to us as Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, because BEAM is seen as a social safety net for those that do not have, the vulnerable ones, so that they can be have their school fees paid for. We're now supporting about 1.5 million pupils. That money is normally for those who are orphans and vulnerable children. And we are there as a ministry to ensure that it benefits those who are vulnerable or orphans. Where we have problems, we have problems when a child who's the child of a civil servant, the child of a businessman, a member of parliament, a community leader, we have a problem when that child is on BEAM. It shows that there is an element of corruption that has happened and occurred. I can assure you that last year, I think was it last year, we had a head somewhere, must be Marsh East, who had his child on BEAM, a head of a school, and I think the deputy head. And those were arrested. They should still be serving their time. So these are the issues that we look at as the Minister of Primary and Secondary Education, that when that money comes, how has it been utilized? When we get our own budget, we have got priorities that we've put in place. And one of the key priorities is infrastructure development of our schools. We have a shortage of schools, between 2,000 to 3,000 schools that we need. We have gone into public-private partnerships to ensure that we construct more schools. We are pleased that His Excellency, the President, Comrade Edim Mnangagwa, has also come in a big way, commissioning the other year 17 state-of-the-art schools. This year, we are also constructing quite a number of schools under that national budget which we have been given. But as government, we also need the assistance of other partners. I think TIZ, you can come in if you've got enough funds. What we really need now is more infrastructure for schools that are existing. We need to ensure that schools that are existing now have got adequate classrooms. You can get a school that was perhaps started operation in 2008 as a primary school, and the enrollment was 500. But you go to that school today, the enrollment is now 2,300. And the same infrastructure that was put in 2008 is still the same infrastructure that is now there to assist delivering quality education to 2,300. You see the problem and the challenge that we face. This is why we then allocate our resources to ensure that existing schools have got adequate infrastructure, and to then those other areas where there is no school at all, particularly if you look at it right now, the new settlements. We are talking of settlements like in Harare, for instance, Caledonia, Gazebo, Southley Park, Eyston, we go to Blueyo, there's a Caudry Park, we go to, there are a lot of new settlements in most of our metropolitan areas. But those new settlements, there are no schools in those new settlements. So this is where we take the government money and then government constructs schools in those areas. So this is our grand plan, particularly as we're going into the NDS2, the major issues or funding that we require as Minister of Primary and Secondary Education is construction of more schools, so that no one and no place is left behind the provision of quality education.
Yes, maybe just to also add, I'm sure Mr. Ndoro will agree with me, is that one of the observations that we've realized is that some of these forms of corruption, you talk of sextortion, corruption in the BEAM selection, is that at times parents are aware of this, but they do not even approach the ministry to report. So we find that the ministry might be creating systems to try and address some of these risks, but the parents also have a role to play in reporting any anomaly. And that is one of the issues that becomes, I think, difficult also for the ministry to effectively act on some of these issues. Perhaps as one of the recommendations is maybe we need a multi-stakeholder approach, parents, CSOs and also the Teachers Association to be able to identify some of these risks and allow the ministry to also act on some of these reports.
Just to buttress Faye on what Ms. Shabangu has said, we have had quite a number of cases. Let's just look at the issue of extra lessons. We apprehend a teacher who has been paid for extra lessons. We want to take the teacher to court. We're getting to court. You've been conducting extra lessons. We've got evidences of what was happening. But we then need parents to come and witness and be key state witnesses. No parent turns up. There is no more witness, and therefore the case dies.
So the parents are now also protecting corruption,
Yes.
because in one way or the other, if it serves them, then they have no reason to report it. From your end, Sfiso, the teachers being corrupt and whatnot, do they also report? Do they come to you as a union and report their fellow teachers, or as long as they are okay, they really don't care about what's happening around them? Because now they're not stopping the ministry from doing what they are supposed to do, and in turn we now have this ripple effect. We are now affecting the education sector as a whole.
It is possible teachers will protect each other, but then we have been giving ministry a very strong suggestion that it has professionalized teaching, so that teachers can police themselves. That is the most effective way of managing and controlling the behavior of professionals, when they can control themselves and master themselves. Without that, without the Teaching Professions Council, which can be a guardrail and protect and also be a guardrail for quality public education in the interest of, on behalf of the public, then definitely we may not place that responsibility on the individual people. It's a free-for-all. That is an unfortunate development. So that is why in our quest to improve the teaching profession and the standards of teaching in this country, we've said, let's professionalize teaching. Let's establish a teaching council, which among many other things will also deal with the issues of discipline in the teaching profession.
Now I'm just going to pose a question that might seem a bit difficult to answer, because you are standing in your own professional capacities. But how then do you think we are supposed to be telling the parents out there to start policing their teachers as well on behalf of the ministries if they see corruption reported? Because it seems as if they really are not aware of their rights or what they are supposed to say, what they are not supposed to say. Because I'm sure at the end of the day, no parent wants to be labeled the bad parent. Their children are going to be singled out in school because you reported a certain teacher for misconduct or this or whatnot. STI, what are your recommendations in regards to that?
Perhaps it could be prudent to establish maybe a whistleblower facility that allows the parents to report without being known or victimized, specifically on cases like BIM selection. I think parents can easily know some of these issues. I think that could be one of the recommendations that we can put out there.
So you have something to say?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy that you posed this question, which is important, particularly to parents. It has been our clarion call over the years, even since I joined the ministry, that parents please come forward to the district office, to provincial office, or even head office, and report some of these incidents of abuse or corruption within the education sector. I am pleased to announce that, as I speak right now, our website and our toll-free line is inundated with a lot of complaints from parents who are now aware of their rights, that I have the right to pay in a currency of my choice, for instance. Because they're getting to the school, sometimes the Zig account has been removed. They're only being given the USD account. They come to us in less than 12 hours, we'll have solved those issues. So because we are able to solve the issues that they report in a very timeless manner, they are now coming in droves with some, and it's far and wide. Chirezi, Slovela, Lupani, Mbire. They come, and the parents, they contact us. They've got our details, and we're solving their issues no matter where they are in Zimbabwe.
So one thing I like from your response is the fact that you speak of inclusion. Yes. Everyone has to report what's going on, despite where they are, their location, yes, and you're going to act on it.
Yes.
But then,
yes, I think without looking at the end result, let us also look at the contributing factor. Let's make education justiciable. And if an individual is expected to pay for fees, what should be the ministry be doing to encourage parents to pay fees, because it is in the absence of those fees that the quality of education will be variable. The implementation of curriculum will be variable. Those who are elites in their own making will have access to education. Those who are poor have no education. They cannot access it and report what he's saying, may not even have the roots to complain. So in this instance, let us make education equitable by ensuring that the funding aspect is also protected. It's protected by law. What do we do to a parent who does not make contribution to the development of their own child? That's very important.
And that now poses my next question: the disparities that exist within our education sector. You all agree with me, or you might choose to disagree with me, that there is still some sort of gap in regards to the quality of education offered in urban areas and peri-urban areas, and we go down to the rural areas. There is still some sort of challenges that we are facing. Take, for example, the issue of infrastructure, textbooks, stationery, the internet, like Siso has just highlighted. As the ministry, what are some of these interventions that you have implemented in order to address some of these gaps so that education is equal for everyone, no matter where they are or where they are learning?
One of the biggest interventions that we have done as the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education is to capacitate and provide leadership courses. A school is what it is today because of the head of the school. And you can see this between schools that have got a radius of 3 kilometers. At one, they're serving the same community. At one school, everything is above board. The lab is full, the furniture is new, there is internet, there is the facilities, the grounds are green. And I'm talking of rural areas. 3 kilometers away, there's another school which has got the same community which it is serving, but the infrastructure is downtrodden, the children are unkept, there's no internet, there's no electricity, there's no backup generator, there's no solar, there's no commercial project at the school, whether it's poultry, it's rabbit, there's nothing. 3 kilometers away, everything else is there. It's an issue of leadership. This is where we then have to remove some of the heads and then put them at other schools. And we also remove champion heads from the schools that they've upgraded. We take them to other schools that are lower and they bring them up. We've got champion heads who have rotated 5, 6, 7 schools, and they left an indelible mark on those schools by raising the standards, regardless of where they are, whether it's in the rural area, it's in peri-urban, or it's in urban. It's a question of leadership. So when you see a school that is doing very well, where you see a school that has got parents, 90% of the parents are paying school fees without being coerced, that please come and pay school fees, it's a question of leadership. Where the leader is not in touch with the community, is not in touch with the teachers, or in touch with the pupils, that school runs down. And it's very easy for us to tell as the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. This is why we go on what we call joint monitoring visits. 2 weeks ago, we went for joint monitoring visits. I was in a team that was being led by the Honorable Minister, Dr. Torai Moyo, in Blueyo Metropolitan. We were visiting quite a number of schools, spending an hour here, 2 hours there. But at one school, we spent almost 3.5 hours. The reason why we spent 3.5 hours, we could see that everything was in shambles at that school. There was no capacity, the head did not have capacity, the deputy, everything, everybody was just doing whatever they think is necessary. Manjake, right? Because the leadership is weak. So it's a question of leadership, and this is why we're capacitating our school heads to ensure that they uplift the quality of our education.
Now, it must not only on you, but I want to pose the questions for you. So now, you are a teachers association. Do you, in your respective associations, also make sure you are teaching the teachers how best they can lead and how best they can help upgrade the schools? Because it does not make sense if they have funding, but you do not know how to use the money. Because at the end of the day, you're just going to use it for things that don't matter, and the school doesn't have stationery, it doesn't have what it needs in order to run properly.
Thank you. I'm very proud of what we have done as Zimbabwe Teachers Association, because we have ingrained in our culture an issue of leadership training. And the leadership training that we've done has also been put into sectors. We have got sectors that we have created, and one may mistake, for example, the National Association of Secondary School Heads to be a creation of the ministry. It is a creation of the Zimbabwe Teachers Association. The National Association of Primary School Heads is a creation of Zimbabwe Teachers Association in order to create that professionalism in the leadership of headmasters and heads of schools. We created that element so that they can have a platform where they deal solely with administrative matters and not to conflate them with labor matters, so that the labor matters are left to the union and the professional matters are given to them. That is where the ministry now finds leaning very heavily on those two associations in order for them to propagate good knowledge. And we are pleased to do that. And we are happy that they are seeing that infrastructure. And now there's a very blurred line between that and the association ZIMTA, and people may not understand, but I want to announce it and proudly say so in the presence of everybody here to say that is our creation, to make sure we professionalize and assist heads to improve. In addition to that, we are also running educational development courses in collaboration with our national university, the Zimbabwe Open University, for leadership. You may want to care to know that the current degree of administration was a creation of our resolution, and we worked together to develop that with the Zimbabwe Open University. And now we have now launched a new program together with the Rabindranath University of India and also of Zimbabwe Open University, artificial intelligence training for teachers and leaders. So that is how we contribute to the improvement of what we see as a gap in the continuous professional development of educators.
Now, the general consensus during this entire discussion has had to do with the issue of budgeting and finance in regards to the education sector. As TIZ, you've done your research, you've done your projects, you have given your input in regards to what needs to be better and your findings from that. But in your view, what are some of the most urgent reforms that need to strengthen accountability in the budgeting and delivery of education services?
I think one of the things that we have been trying to work on extensively is firstly the ministry, within the ministry, for them to identify what are corruption risks, right, and respond effectively to them by creating their own systems. I think it would be unfair for us to come in and just prescribe the systems. The systems should and reforms should come from within the ministry. What we have done is to identify those risks and create an opportunity for the ministry to reform or to strengthen some of the systems. Like I mentioned, one of the things was that perhaps raising awareness on the whistleblower framework can be very key. And also how do we publicize that whistleblower mechanism that can actually enable people to report corruption confidently. And also there is some of the complexities in reporting corruption that we need to understand. One of those is how do you report sextortion, for example. Mm-hmm. Given the difficulties in gathering evidence and so forth, how do we ensure that teachers within the teachers union actually are able to report any form of sextortion? So these are some of the recommendations that we have been trying to work on extensively, and also we hope that the ministry will actually take some of these on board, and also other stakeholders as well. Mm-hmm. And then maybe another issue is strengthening the procurement system. Currently, the government of Zimbabwe has actually been saying we need to move to the EGP system. Let's try to put everything electronically to allow other stakeholders to review, make input, to promote fairness in the procurement system. That could be another way. What we have seen is that in some instances, other stakeholders prefer to operate in the grey market. They don't want to use the electronic procurement system. So these are some of the recommendations that we have been clearly pointing out. And what we need to do is, I think, as a a parting shot, I would say that we cannot implement all the recommendations at a go. We can identify those that are actually feasible within the ministry, that can be easily framed, implemented, and then we can track the results over over a period of time.
Very valuable insights that you are giving us there. I would have wanted Tangana to come in and also, buttress what you're saying. But before we do that, so you wanted to say something.
Yes, I think I agree with him on the issue of the risk issues. But I think what is important now is, as part of knowledge development, maybe let us develop also a risk profile, and then we can do some bit of risk mitigation strategies collectively, so that when we deal with risk mitigation strategies, we are answering to what already is happening in our spheres.
Now, I just want you to just explain to us risk factors, a risk profile. What do you mean by that?
He mentioned quite a number of issues, and so those issues are really profiled in order to create and say what's the probability of this happening at this level. There should be indicators that we are following to say if the behavior of this person is at this level, we should tick and make sure it's either red zone, and therefore it needs us to go in very strongly with mitigatory factors to block it from happening or completely exterminating it. It's a strategic thinking that we need to implement in terms of preventing such issues. That to me is a very positive development in the research that I think when we work forward we can use, and that is what is striking in the contribution. And I think the other issue is obviously public expenditure tracking. The public expenditure tracking is a very important tool that we should be using now for us to say value for money. If this bus is a second-hand bus and is said to be costing almost as good as new, really, where was it bought? The grey market that he's talking about. We should really be saying there's value for money, and then we are teaching parents to say, be careful where you are purchasing your issues, and that is to me any monitoring tool. And the monitoring that we are doing with the ministry and evaluation, definitely what is lacking there is probably to say what is the return on the investment in education that we are monitoring, and then we should be measuring the return on investment, both socially. Are we impacting in the lives of our people? Economically, are we impacting the lives of our people? That is where education should be evaluated, and we see whether there's value for money there.
Now, some of the points that they're raising, or some of the major indicators they are putting to say how can we curb corruption or inefficiencies within our education sector, is by reducing human interaction in regards to procurement of goods and materials. What is your take on that? How best can you as the ministry leverage on technology in order to help address some of the core challenges that have caused corruption thus far?
Thank you. We have done that. We're already embracing technology in ICT to bring corruption down. Like Mr. Shabang was saying, I think there's an issue that he's been talking about, but we've not been responding, like the issue of sextortion. The issue of sextortion is a very difficult issue, especially within our cultural context. We have platforms where they can report these issues to us. I can tell you personally of an incident that was reported to my inbox in a platform where the victim, a woman, was using a pseudonym to report the case to me. She gave me all the details, and I was trying to do preliminary investigations with the district office. And when I was about to get really headway, we needed her to come out and say, I am the victim. I was the one who was abused for the reasons of transfer and so on and so forth. And she said she would get back to me. 24 hours later, she got back to me and she says, Mr. Ndoro, I'm sorry, I cannot proceed with this case. Why? I'm a married woman. And for me to go out there and say, this happened to me, it's got a ripple effect on myself and my reputation, and my reputation with my in-laws. So I would rather let it slide. That's how we had to let that go. But she had come on a platform, the ICT that you're talking about, and we had difficulty in trying to resolve it. It's still unresolved to this day because she couldn't come forward. She couldn't say who exactly she is, what's her name, what's her EC number. But these are some of the challenges that we have, where you need to have parents or teachers who have got the bravery to say, if I don't do it, then a lot more victims are falling in line because no one is coming out to come and say, I'm reporting this case of sextortion. So it is our clarion call as the ministry that please do come. We have got lots of psycho support systems to ensure that we handle the matter in a manner that does not affect your reputation entirely. Even engaging the family and family members to ensure that they understand that we need to stop this. Then also in the issue of embracing ICT to curb corruption, I can give you another example of what we do, particularly in terms of applying for Form 1 boarding places. You notice that we don't allow parents to go to schools to solicit for a Form 1 boarding place. It's all online on our EMAP system. Factor in your child's candidate number. So they're just candidate numbers and center numbers. The name of the child is not even there. The heads of the schools with boarding schools, they just get in, they get this candidate and that candidate and that candidate, maybe based on their results. And then afterwards, the child can then see on the platform that they have been accepted at Mont Casino, they have been accepted at St. Ignatius, they have been accepted at Regina Mundi. There is no human interface. So these are some of the strategies we're putting in place. I can assure you that in terms of transfers and recruitment, the same is also in line.
Now, allow me now to jump in because we have less than 5 minutes left, and then I would like to ask to quickly just speak on another system that you have implemented to track how far it has come. As TIZ, you've said some of the issues in your research have had to do with some vulnerabilities to do with women and girls. Just quickly, if you could just tell us, what are some of those issues that you've highlighted? And if Tongana, if you could just come in and tell us about the early warning system, the EWS, in regards to school dropouts, and how also as teachers that is also helped you in your work. Like I did say, it's just now 5 minutes, so we don't have plenty of time.
Okay, so I'll just say briefly, all the corruption risks that we have identified have a triple or double effect on women and girls or groups at risk of discrimination. What I think that's the fundamental issue that we have identified, that corruption is on its own discriminatory, because you are asking someone who have access to income to pay a bribe. You are asking someone who is maybe at a certain level in society to part with either with their money or so forth for them to access a specific service. So in the case that women or broadly or groups that are at risk of discrimination are already in the lower ends of the society, they find it difficult to either pay a bribe to access that service. You talk of extra lessons, you talk of BEAM and so forth. So they actually left out in the whole developmental matrix.
Sfiso?
Yeah, what I'm seeing as a very good system is in the placement of Form 1s. I think that is a good system. We should calibrate it further, make it more efficient and more responsive. Because of the network issues, sometimes it gets clogged. But that has helped a lot because you don't have a lot of congestion in the schools, and eventually you don't have an issue of selective entrances. So it's raising the levels of equity and access to certain levels that we appreciate. So from teaching profession point of view, I think school heads find it very easy, but it's cumbersome when it drops down and there's no network to get people through. It frustrates.
Now, Tangana, let's talk about the school dropouts. 49,555 learners dropping out of school in 2024 alone. Just quickly, has the early warning system borne fruit since its inception?
Yes, the early warning system is working wonders. What the system does is that we early identify a child who's at risk of dropping out. And there could be various reasons why that child drops out. Mainly it could be financial, or they could be coming from a child-headed family, or the parents are just absent, they're not there, or the parents are really, they're there, but they're not there. The father is always away, the mother is always away. These are the children that we then identify and realize that this child may drop out of school for one reason or the other. This is why these are the children whom we call vulnerable children, who are then supposed to benefit from the basic education assistance module so that they do not drop out of school because of that. This is why we then have the other strategy of the school feeding program, because these are the children whom we then identify. Then we can see that this child went to bed on an empty stomach, woke up, came to school, traveled 5 to 10 kilometers to school on an empty stomach again. This is why we have to prioritize feeding this child and making sure also that this child is on beam. So the early warning system is helping us identify these children and say they need some sort of special treatment from the ministry, from the school administration, from the community, so that they are also able to benefit from the quality education that is being provided.
Well, our discussion tonight has been improving social accountability in the education sector, and this program has been brought to you in partnership with Transparency International Zimbabwe. In studio today, I was joined by Taonga Nandoro, Director of Communications and Advocacy, Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. We also had Dr. Sfiso Ndlovu, Chief Executive Officer, Zimbabwe Teachers Association, ZIMTA, as well as Ngobani Shabangu, Head of Programs, Transparency International Zimbabwe. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you very much.
And you have been watching The Chase. I have been your host, Faith Nyore. Good evening and enjoy the rest of your viewing.
ZTN Prime subscribes to regulations governing broadcasting services in Zimbabwe. All programming is produced and aired within the framework stipulated by Broadcasting Authority of Zimbabwe. For complaints or general feedback, kindly contact us on Twitter at ZTN Prime, Facebook at ZTN Prime, Instagram at ZTN Prime, TikTok at ZTN Prime, or WhatsApp us on +263 71 817 8745, or email us on our website feedback@ztn.co.zw.
music yandofarira nini hai nindofarira zvangu
machiso
inge ndichingorova zvangu marounds ndiri pari pecbd
old school chero old school chete